Welcome back, MTG Joe here. We're here for another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at all the best decks on the MTG Arena ladder. This video is going to be for the Timeless best of 3 metagame analysis. So we're going to take a look at the most popular decks, the highest win rate decks, and we got a big tournament this weekend as well. AnzidMTG hosted a 1K, I think it went up to 1.5K. In terms of prize pool, there was 92 participants, so we got a nice mix of decks there as well we'll take a look at. And we'll likely start seeing some of these shift onto the arena ladder as well in terms of like popularity and potentially win rates as well. So a lot of cool stats that we're going to be looking at. We'll jump into all the details in a moment. Just a reminder for folks from a content perspective, as I will be doing surgery next week, a week today. So I will be intermittent for 2 weeks. I might do content, might not. It really just depends how I feel. So appreciate any support in the meantime, just throwing on videos, stuff like that. But I haven't gone away fully and just need to take care of the health issues for now. But let's jump into it. We are going to be looking at data from Untapped. So companion tool tracks your win rates along with other users, gives a whole bunch of cool stats. Untapped link is in the video description below. I'll paste all these deck lists as well so you can see. So we are going to be looking at the popularity of the decks. So popularity of the day. So popular decks don't necessarily correlate to winningness decks. Some are just people like playing decks, certain pet decks, stuff like that. Same time, decks can have very high win rates, but maybe overtly complex or just very expensive in terms of wildcards. So people might not jump into it. But if we're looking at the day, Jund Midrange and Rakdos Midrange are both at about 13%. One note, Untapped is still having a bug where it's not tracking Field of the Dead decks, mono green Titan decks. So that is a popular deck on the format. We'll take a look at a dedicated deck list from the tournament. That's also something to consider. But note that of these stats, it is partially skewed from popularity breakdown because mono green is not being factored into the overall win rate. So Jund Midrange 13.5. So this will include both the Lurrus Death Shadow style builds as well as the Giganta builds. You have Rakdos Midrange at 13.2. This will take into account both Rakdos Breach and the more traditional midrange decks. So there's some that are Giganta, there's some that are just no companion that will play Fable, One Ring Sheoldred, and then there's the Breach versions or just like Lurrus Death Shadow style versions. The Lurrus Death Shadow is the least representative. 5-color domain is the aggro zoo deck at 11.5. So we have 3 double digits, and then we kind of drop down to Sultai Midrange, which are like Oko piles, Uro piles. Could be a little bit more controlling, could be a little bit more mid-rangey. Dimir Control is the Lurrus control deck. This is popularized by Missman at 5.5. Difficult deck to play. You're not signing up for this deck to play short games. 4-color control is either classifying the Omnath kind of money piles or a kind of just control deck that is playing 4 colors, Uro, Oko, Teferi, Minsc & Boo kind of style. Rakdos Burn at 2.8 and Mono Black Control at 2.8. So if we're kind of looking at trends, we are seeing a slight decline in the popularity of the Rakdos midrange deck with the Jund midrange deck more recently popping off. With a lot of these decks, I do have gameplay videos up on my channel if you want to take a look at what these decks are in action. They might not be card for card, but the general strategy is there. With this Jund midrange deck, we just played it the other day. I got a feel for a couple different variants and trying out some stuff. We are also trying out some brews, like at a Gruul aggro deck with like Tarmogoyf and Embercleave, just trying to see how that played out. The domain deck's been fairly stable. We're seeing an up and down of the Dimir Control. If we see the spike here, this was likely last weekend when Missman won the tournament, or 2 weekends ago, and then people picked up the deck, realized it's probably hard to play, and then dropped it. Similarly, we see Sultai midrange increase. I know Crokies was playing a bit of it, so likely seeing some kind of correlation there. And then if we look at the win rates, the 4-color control actually has been increasing. It was pretty low in terms of win rates. Similarly, the Rakdos Burn deck has been picking up as more. The Rakdos deck, the Burn deck's really good against the Jund decks, the Jund midrange. So if we're seeing an increase in Jund, that kind of correlates as well. And it can also outpace the Dimir Control deck because there's not really life gain in the Dimir deck as well. So if we're going to look at the meta itself, we're going to do January 8th through the 15th, Platinum to Mythic rank, 23,000 games. Now, I'm going to do a filter of 35 matches minimum. I know the larger the population, you do tend to get a little bit more normalized data sets. But really what we want to look at is what kind of deviations in terms of decks are doing well. Like Jund midrange has been doing well the last few weeks. What kind of configurations, when new cards are coming in, what's coming out. The percentage when you're this small of a sample size, it'll have some influence in terms of what we flag, but really it's to kind of see what's coming up, what are people trying, stuff of that nature. So it's more about kind of finding the optimized list and less about, 80% for 74%, I'll tell you now, probably just by the hands of a different player, could influence the games more. But with that said, Untapped does have it where if we go to sub 50 matches, I'll just have to reference back to the screen for the win rate. So Rakdos midrange, so the Breach combo deck is the highest win rate of the week. It's 35 games, 80%. So we'll jump into that. Oh, it does show up. Cool. Sometimes it doesn't. So this is the combo version of the deck. So like I said, there is a Rakdos midrange deck that is playing Blood Moons. It's playing more of a midrange plan. And what this deck is trying to do is it's got a fair plan and then it's got a combo backup. So it's built around Otherworld Breach, which lets you cast cards from your graveyard by exiling 3. So what you're able to do is fill the graveyard with things like Dragon Rage Chandler, Stitcher Supplier, which just kind of fuels for an extra cast. You have fetch lines that also contribute to it, as well as like free things like Mishra's Bauble. And what you're trying to do, put a bunch of cards, then what you do is chain together Dark Rituals, Demonic Tutor, or Diabolic Intent, or just naturally mill over Tendrils of Agony. Keep casting spells, filling your graveyard with either the Stitcher Suppliers repeatedly or the Dragon Rage Chandlers, and then you're able to cast Tendrils for Agony for lethal. You have the fair game plan of sometimes you're just going to beat down with Dragon Rage Chandlers, Ragavans, miscellaneous creatures, Bowmasters, stuff of that nature. You can, like with Phyrexian Towers, sack the Stitcher Supplier to kind of get that free mill value. Similarly, like Thoughtseize for Hand Hate, you have removal in Lightning Bolt and Fatal Push. Some of the lists I have seen have moved off Ragavan in the main for Deathrite Shaman in the main. It depends on how you want to approach it. Ragavan's a little weak, I think, into like such a heavy Bowmaster meta. But if there's more kind of slower decks, stuff like that, it does present a threat that needs to be answered. Otherwise, it kind of snowballs the game away. Lurrus Companion in here, so it gets you more copies of Breach, really. Tormod's Crypt, Graveyard Hate, that's free. Deathrite Shaman for the grindier matchups. Again, like if your Ragavan's not going to be able to connect through, this helps you kind of grind out. Also reasonable to eat away at the graveyards. Notably with this mana base, there's no access to green mana through something like an Overgrown Tomb, so it is really just going to be used for the land ramp and the exile instants and sorceries. Needle for activated abilities, Feed the Swarms to deal with enchantment-based hate, so things like Rest in Peace, Leyline, stuff of that nature. Grape Shot is brought in as a second storm condition. So if your opponent has a way to say interact, you're able to, so Slaughter Games, a Stone Rain style effect, or if they're able to pick it off from the graveyard, you have Grape Shot as a secondary. So different name, can't get hit by the kind of Necromentia style effects. Molten Collapse, removal, but notably also can deal with 1 mana hate pieces, so Soul Guide Lantern, it can deal with Cage, anything of that nature, and then a License Hearse as Graveyard Hate as well. We then move to 5-color creativity. So I think Tyrant of Tales was playing this a bit, and I think Doomwake as well. They were chatting about it, but 74%. Again, smaller sample size, so less around that, but more around the idea. So we've seen creativity decks in pretty much every format at this point. The kind of core of the deck is you play no other creatures other than, in this case, the main board is Atraxa. And with creativity, you target an artifact or a creature token. You have Fable the Mirror Breaker, which can make multiple tokens. Oko can make tokens. Minskin can make tokens. Notably as well, if you look at the mana base configuration, it's all pretty much mountains in terms of the mana base. You have fetches to obviously fetch that, but you also have Dwarven Mine. The Dwarven Mine is similar to the blue kind of put an instant, I forget the name right now. It is a mountain, so it's fetchable. And when it comes into play, if you have 3 other mountains, you get to create a 1/1 dwarf token. So you can do this at your opponent's end step, fetch, get the token when this is your 4th land, and then just untap creativity, win. generally attracts as like the big bomb. A lot of decks have a difficult time dealing with it. Your main boards, you got 8 pieces of 1 mana removal between Lightning Bolt and Swords to Plowshare, Spell Pierce's Disruption, Brainstorm to kind of reset up your hand. So if you draw a Traxa, you can put it back, fetch it away. Reprieve as like a tempo element, and then Minsk and Boo, Oko are kind of a fair game plan to just beat your opponent to death, and then Leyline Bindings and really another 1 mana removal spell. Your sideboard, so no companion, given that you're on triple red here. So Lightning Helix, just as a catch-all removal that could gain you some life against the aggressive decks. Rest in Peace for Graveyard Hate. Sunset Revelry for the aggressive base decks. Terra Sunder for Artifact Enchantment Hate. Weather the Storm for the Storm matchup. Anger the Gods for Go Wide. Serra Emissary against creature-heavy decks. So against some decks, they just can't beat Serra Emissary, so if they're looking like creature pile, stuff like that nature, it's a good threat to bring in. And then Jurassic Park Forest. So you specifically need to add Jurassic Park Forest because dinosaurs are cool. But any forest will do. It's really just to play against the Blood Moon matchup. You're able to fetch for a forest if needed to get play around the Blood Moons. We then move to Izzet Phoenix. So we actually haven't seen much Phoenix in the ladder, in part due to the fact Bowmaster's omnipresent. And this is a powerful deck. Really the thing is, can you deal with Bowmaster? So 63%, 38 games. Kind of the core of the deck is put Phoenix into graveyard, cast 3 instants or sorceries, and then get it back. So it's kind of recurrable value. Dragon Rage Chandler and Ledger Shredder are 2 creatures that help enable that strategy. Between Brainstorm, Consider, Faithless Looting, you got a lot of ways. Treasure Cruise is a 1 mana draw spell. So lots and lots of ways to draw cards. It's a matter of, do those cards actually line up that you don't get hit by Bowmaster? And you're trying to play that around that with things like Unholy Heat, as well as Lightning Bolt kind of playing in there. A card that I wouldn't like hate is Spikefield Hazard. I played it in my mono red Blood Moon deck, and it's another clean answer to like Ragavan on 1, DRC, and Bowmaster itself, as well as exiling it, which against like the Dimir deck, the control deck, which wants to bring it back as many times as possible, is another nice line. Stern Scolding in here is a 1 mana on the stack answer to Bowmaster, but you're just kind of playing draw a bunch of cards. You're going to see a lot of your deck every game. Very clean mana base, 17 lines kind of mixed into there. Check out the companion. You have Pithing Needles for activated abilities, Spell Pierce for disruption, more Scoldings, Cast into Fire is more removal, which plays nicely, as well as dealing with artifacts. So this can deal with the One Ring. Shredder when they bring in a lot of Graveyard Hate, also just a reasonable body on its own. Unlicensed for Graveyard Hate, Blood Moon for non-basic hate. You are playing a couple islands, and the rest of your deck can function otherwise. And then kind of a cool one. So if your opponent brings in a lot of Graveyard Hate, your Phoenix plan may not work. But Fiery Inscription attacks at a different angle, where the ring tempts you is fine, whatever, but it's whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you turn it into a shock. So if you could just chain together, like, say in a normal Phoenix turn, you're playing 3 draw spells, well, now they deal 6 damage to your opponent. So everything becomes shock, which is kind of a cool line as an alternate win condition for the deck. Moving on, we go to Dimir Control. So this is the Mistman special. I know during the tournament, some folks, Nathan Stoyer and others, kind of adapted their versions of the deck. A big thing in the sideboard that they were playing was the Myrex as kind of a mirror breaker. The deck doesn't really interact with lands well, and if you just keep presenting threats, works pretty nice. Mistman decks, I will preface this, I made it last week. He's very good at control. He builds his decks in a manner that work for him. They don't work for the average person. A lot of one-ofs, kind of pace of play, stuff of that nature. So if you pick up the deck, you don't do well with it, don't be discouraged. I've personally tried some Mistman decks and done terrible. I probably consume more of his content than any other creator. Like, he's my go-to for a lot of entertainment after. So I've watched like a lot of his kind of nuance, and some of his win rates are insane. But in any case, kind of the core of the deck, your only win conditions are Bowmaster and Aluris. Basically, the deck is go into super hard control, counter spells, removal, a whole bunch of different options. You bring them back with Mystic Sanctuary. You have dig through time to kind of find answers. Commit to Memory can be a win condition. Memory with Bowmaster out. Soren's Ransom as Fact or Fiction style effect. So just a whole bunch of different ways to control the deck. Luris Companion is another way to win. Sideboard's just going to be a whole bunch of different removal options, activated abilities, hand hates, Filigree Silex works really cool against the Field of the Dead matchup. You can wipe every turn if you have a Lurrus out and just keep bringing it back and just taking out the tokens, which is a cool line there. But if you ever want to see it in action, the games go like pretty much 40 minutes each time. So you are not going to play this on their 15-minute lunch break. We then go to Mono Black Control. So this version here, there's a couple different versions of the Mono Black deck. There's a Necropotence version that's a Storm deck. There's this version here, which is a one-ring control deck. There was also another one from Elliot Dragon we'll cover in the tournament, which was playing Necropotence in 5-mana Ashiok from WoW. That deck looked really, really sweet. I'm going to try that one out as soon as I can. Sorry about that. A little congested. So this version of the deck, you're not going like Necro Storm. It's kind of playing a Dark Ritual into Black Market Connection. So this is a Baldur Gates card. So at the beginning of your pre-combat main step, you choose one. So you get you have to choose one. So you're either paying 1, 2, 3, or any number of lives, up to 6. 1 life gets you a treasure token, 2 life draws you a card, 3 life gives you a 3/2 changeling. So you can kind of go the full gambit, gain a whole bunch of life, stuff like that. This helps you kind of ramp in a different way. So while you're not getting the embedded card advantage of the Necromentia that gets around Bowmaster, you are getting kind of sustained. It also helps you ramp. Fatal Pushes. Only a single copy of March. You see the full copies of March in the Necromentia deck because you could end step kind of pitch a bunch of things. But Bowmasters, Edicts, this version's on some Lilianas. I don't love Liliana in this format, given that there's so much Bowmaster going around, but it is a way to kind of attack the slower decks. Full Shelly, 1-ring action, 2 Invoke Despairs, dust them off from standard ban list, some Virtues of Persistence, and then you do have the Peer into the Abyss Shieldred combo. Similarly, it also combos with Bowmaster. So it's kind of like ramp up and then kind of combo kill with some control elements mixed in. Field of Ruin against a lot of decks, they're only playing maybe 1 to 2 basics, so kind of strip mine them that way. You can also use this against Field of the Dead to get rid of the field itself. Bajuka Bog, Phyrexian Tower in here. Don't know if I love Tower, given that you don't have a huge density of creatures either. And then this might screw up your earlier turns, especially because you have the 4 Field of Ruins in there. Then move to Jund Midrange. So we played a version of this deck on the channel. This one's at 59%. So there's a couple different variants. Like I said, there's the Death Shadow lower to the ground version. There's a like mid-rangey focus. There's versions that are just like all in on Charcel. There's some that are heavier on Fable. Some are on Goyfs, some aren't. So it's really how you want to kind of build the deck. That's the thing with Jund. You have so many great options. It's how you want to kind of configure. The version I ran, I did -1 mints because you can see I'm missing a wild card, and I just went the full lightning bolts. After playing with this deck, I don't know if I necessarily want Ragavan in this deck or to this number. The Questing Druids were pretty solid. Jarsoul was really good. I would probably just, at the very least, trim a Ragavan, go up another Fable, just for the grind elements. The one thing I will say in this mana base, so this one's from Natso777. I was talking to them. They are a Japanese player on YouTube. So I just didn't like, they had a good win rate with the deck. I just didn't like Castle Lockwain or Restless Vents. More often than not, they came in tapped or they screwed up my earlier draws. If I wanted a creature land, I think I'd play Hive of the Eye Tyrant and then just get rid of the castle. I ended up cutting the Restless Vents for Blood Crypt, and then the castle would be probably something I would substitute as well. But good grind elements to the deck. You could kind of find, I really like the Questing Druid in this package. Personally, I think I would prefer the Dragon Rage Chandler Mishra's Bauble version. If you're going that variant, then Tarmogoyf is good. If you're not on a Bauble plan, I don't like the Tarmogoyf as much because I found that there was less. Additionally, if you're on Tarmogoyf, Klothys and Tarmo and Deathrite Shaman don't play well together. I played another deck, like I said, the Gruul deck, where Klothys was very good, but my Goyfs were like 1/2s or 2/3s because we were competing over the same graveyard resources, especially in like the red, black, green mirrors. Jen got the Companion, so this version's got Duresses, her hand hate, Haywire Might, Artifact Enchantment hate, Needles, Soul Guide Lantern, Veil of Summer, Meat Hook for the aggressive decks. You can also go with something like Anger the Gods. You can go a Brotherhood's End. The one thing was with Anger, it will exile your Jar Soul and your lower spells. With the Jar Soul, you want to recast them. Blood Moon for the kind of greedy mana-based decks. The one card I also tried out in my version was Omnixus the Adversary. Very, very good into the Dimir deck. They usually hold up like one counter, so you get two planeswalkers out of it. Helped me grind, gain some life against some of the slower control decks. That was a card I think, to be honest, is somewhat underrepresented right now in the format. I feel like a lot of the aggressively slanted decks are going Luris, so you lose out on it, but card that I'm probably going to try out a bit more as the games go on. Then move to Rakdos Burn. So this is very aggressively slanted deck. See that they moved up to 17 lands. But this version here I really like, and they're doing what I think is the better package with Dragon Rage Chandler, Mishra's Bauble. There's some that are playing like the Black Saga, but this version here just very aggressive. You got the play with fires. You have Kumanos, Swift Spears, Lightning Bolts, DRC, single Spike Field Hazard. So really 18 lands, which is, you're flooding in Rakdos. But Eidolons, Bowmasters, light up the stage for card advantage, skewer the critics, and really it's just about dealing as much damage as possible, as quickly as possible to your opponent. This version's also improved the mana base, so less copies of lands that will ping you with the Eidolon. The Mount Dooms, I always find it an interesting inclusion. I don't know how often you're actually going to do those additional pings, but basic Swamp hopefully doesn't mess you up with your Eidolon, but that helps you play around the Blood Moon decks. Luris Companion, Graveyard Hate with some life gain, Thoughtseize for hand hate, Unholy Heat mixed in there as well. Wouldn't hate with this deck even. So the Field of the Dead matchup could go either way. I've been playing a lot of Rakdos Burn and Best of One, and it's really just how, like, if they get two threats to play around Natural Order, if your like burn spells don't really line up, it's really who kind of goes off first. I wouldn't hate in this version because like the Luris plan, like Bowmaster's not great against Field of the Dead. Similarly, like Luris won't die, but you're not recurring crazy value against them, and they're usually just going to overrun you anyways. So I would say maybe Blood Moon as a sideboard option, especially if you could play around it, would help. Then go to 5-color Domain Zoo, 58% win rate, and this version here of the deck is really just playing Domain, so all the colors, you're leveraging Savai Triome and Zagoth Triome as ways to turn on all 5 colors, power up things like Teriel Kavu. Notably, this one's not playing the other 2-mana X3 Trample Domain dude. Full Ragavans, full Wild Nacatl. Some of them are playing Deathrite Shaman in place of Ragavan, or kind of a substitution in terms of the mana. I would probably play some Deathrite. I really like it in the deck. Also helps you accelerate into like Okos or Minskinboos, Leyline Binding, as well as Bolt and Tribal Flames as removal, but these two can go face in addition. Your Jingantha Companion, your sideboard's got like Relic for Graveyard Hate, Veil of Summer for protection against counters and removal, Reprieve for the big mana decks, Terra Sunder for Artifact Enchantment Hate, Graveyard Hate, and Unlicensors, and then Oko full package for the more controlling style decks. Then move to 4-color control. So this is every color except black, but kind of black. So again, domain pile, but taking a different avenue. We saw the aggressively slanted domain. Now we have the more controlling. So it's got a Planeswalker package with Oko and Minskinboo. You're using Deathrite Shaman to potentially get you ahead. Brainstorm's in here for card advantage. Your only early removal with this deck is Swords to Plowshare, so you're a little soft to enemy Bowmasters. You do have Leyline Binding, but your lines have to kind of align to that. You can reset your Brainstorms with Lorien Revealed or any of the fetch lines. Stifle can blow up your opponent's fetches, so if they fetch, you can stifle it and they kind of go down a land, which is kind of cool. Mystic Sanctuary could rebuy your spells. Sideboard, Deafening Silence against Storm decks, activated abilities, small creatures, red or green decks, anything looking to draw a bunch of cards, really good in the Brainstorm mirrors, and then Elish Norn for anything with Enter the Battlefield style effects. We see this sometimes in Modern as well, in like the Elemental decks. Then move to Grixis Pact. So this deck's 55% Platinum to Mythic, but if we actually shift to Diamond, it's up to 62. So playing a little bit better as you go up the rank. So this is probably a deck that rewards skill a little bit more. So the whole kind of concept of this deck is you're playing Tainted Pact. So Tainted Pact, you're playing 2 copies. You're playing 2 copies of Thassa's Oracle. This one's the Lurrus version of the deck. Sometimes they won't play Lurrus, so you can play Jace, Wielder of Mysteries as an alternate win condition. But basically, you'll Tainted Pact kind of 2 ways. You can cast Thassa's Oracle, go full control with trigger on the stack, cast Tainted Pact, exile your entire graveyard, win that way. Tainted Pact can also help you find your combo, and then like your next piece, and then cast Thassa's Oracle. The deck is all 1-ofs otherwise, so you don't hit the same second card, so that way you can win that turn. That includes your mana base. So if you ever see kind of like weird inclusions in the mana base, things like Sulfur Falls, like weird lands, snow basics, stuff of that nature, that's usually why. The rest of the deck's hand manipulation, card draw, counters, removal, demonic tutor kind of effects, just finding the combo itself. It's very click intensive. Probably wouldn't play on mobile, but your sideboard, again, you're gonna have a whole bunch of 1-ofs. Just situationally, do you want more counters? Do you want more removals? Do you want more like hand hate? How do you want to interact with your opponent? And kind of go from that angle of attack. And then lastly, we'll jump to the tournament itself. So AnzidMTG on Twitter hosted this, started off as a 1K, they went up in enrollment, so they went to 1.5. This was a $20 paid entry for this tournament. And if we look at the Swiss round, unfortunately, we don't get the archetype breakdown. I think there was like 7 Dimirs from watching Missman's stream. The finals was a Jund midrange mirror. We'll take a look at some of the Swiss rounds. So like if we look at the Jund deck, we had this version here with like Lelia, which actually looked really solid in the games. We had 3 Ragavans in here. We had some Shieldreds. We had the One Ring in this version. Main board Ashiok Dream Render, 2 Blood Moons main, so some interesting inclusions there. The Jund midrange from Nicole Dubbin, who won. Similarly, 2 Lelias, 4 Tarmogoyfs. We had the Minskaboo Blood Moon main. So these Jund decks usually have a hard time against the Field of the Dead decks, but main board and Blood Moon to help with that matchup. We see the sideboard Fables, which is kind of cool. In addition, so if we look at the match itself, I'll link this. You could take a look at all the deck lists. Again, this is kind of a smaller tournament setting, under 100 people, but still a good, like, it's the biggest tournament we've had of this, so we start seeing some innovation. So we see like this Grixis list here, Orcish Bowmaster, Snaps, Tishana's. It's basically the Dimir deck with Lightning Bolts in there. You got some Kolaghan's Command and Blood Moon in the side, so some interesting inclusions there. They went 7-0 in the Swiss. The Jund midrange that we looked at, AlthMTG, YouTuber MTG Arena Zone, did well with the Mono Green Titan list. Notable there, they are playing a full set of Guest Lost in the sideboard to deal with Blood Moon, so some interesting innovation there. We have the Jund midrange deck, Mono Green Titan, so this one from Mason Clark was on full 4 Karns in the main board, so Karn Wish board, helping with any of the kind of combo decks. I know someone in my Discord was 4-2 at one point and got faced up against these card decks, lost with Belcher. So got a lot of hate pieces that you can tutor for as well. This is the deck that I really want to try. This was really, really cool. So using Ashiok Wicked Manipulator, the Woe Ashiok, which cares about cards into exile, both for the tokens and for the ultimate. So using that with the Necropotence for Leyline of the Void main, it's a devotion list, so you're playing Nykthos with Sunken Citadel to reduce the activation cost. So the Sunken Citadel can pay 2 for the Nykthos. Great Merchant of Asphodel, Orcish Bowmasters, March of Wretched Sorrows, Karn Great Creator for a Karn Wish board. So a lot of cool kind of stuff there. If we're looking, so this is just like 4-color Control, 4-color Omnath, some more Jund. The Rakdos Foundry deck, 5-2, the Overcooked deck. Making food fights in a Rakdos version. Had a pretty nice run. There was a Naya Winota deck that was playing Grizzled Huntmaster's Redemption as ways to find Winotas from your sideboard, which is really cool. It also lets you help to find kind of hate pieces mixed into there. We had Mono Black Storm in here. So this was the Tendrils version with Beseech the Mirror. Third one, Necropotence mixed into there. Izzet Tempo. Delver deck. Delver has made it as a 5-2. So kind of cool. Zach Young was the one I was mentioning on as well as Ali Eldrazi was playing very similar deck. So Belcher could win turn 2 with this particular deck. We have the creativity decks kind of mixed into there as well. Gruul Aggro, hello. So this one is kind of a prowess version. Jar Souls, Dragon Rage, Kamano, Swift Spears, Eidolon. So kind of a burn deck with the Tarka's command and scale up mixed into the deck itself. So a lot of cool decks here. I'll link this if you want to get started. And yeah, that's it for the week. Lots of cool stuff happening in Timeless. Best format on Arena. Catch you next time. Thanks for watching.